as we invite Mr. Tato Sekgwale to present, Mr. Tato will give you the chance to present, and then also within that 15 minutes, we will ask members to ask questions of clarity, only members. We are not debating the presentation that is going to be done by Mr. Tato Sekgwale. We only ask questions of clarities. Over to you, Mr. Tato Sekgwale. You are welcome in our committee.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to Chairperson, honorable members, and the compatriots of South Africa. No legislation may permit arbitrary evictions. So in that statement, we, the youth of South Africa, recognize the importance of Section 24, Section 25, and Section 26 of the Constitution, and thus the right of the safe environment, property, and housing. Noticing that our people cry for the return of their land and the recent political will to make the land reform a priority as a vehicle for education, technology, social, and economic transformation. Noticing and recognizing the noble vision set out for the National Development Plan, herein describe the vision of 2030 and beyond to create a prosperous and more equitable Republic South Africa. And also recognizing the Built Environment Initiative Act of 43 of 2000. We say that the expropriation of land has a desiring principle of Batubili to ensure that we have an approach that is social building and nation building and achieving resilience in how the expropriation, having recognized the deep landscape that we need to advance our public sector, our private sector, and the civil society. The roles of the public sector and the civil society in the running of this national wealth is to create an interconnected and interdependent coherence planning system between national, provincial, municipal, the society, and the district government. The few challenges that we may encounter are the tendency of South Africans and South African institutions to work uniformly, whether in the public sector or in the private sector or in the civil society. So in that approach, a triangular and circular system that will continuously improve the scope of change and the velocity of change in a dynamic environment. Herein will suggest a couple of solutions in how the expropriation stated above will arise due to the framework of what we are submitting towards the Act of 63 of 1973. We recognize that there is a need to have an intelligent economy, monitoring and movement of all the goods and how they are delivered, and also intelligent people to carry out the expropriation bill in a manner that will have the governance of monitoring people and the natural environment aligning with the NDPs, the IDPs to evaluate efficiency and policies achieving the goals that is set out for the expropriation, and the monitoring of environment and intelligent living as the people's standard of living and governance service delivery. In the expropriation, we have recognized that colonialism has three components of this oppression, dependency, and oppression of indigenous people within the disorder which they live in with every day. We battle this every day, regardless of requirement of the native individuals having grounded more time in our post-apartheid era. The resolutions and the compromise is still recolonization, since it is permitting the colonizer to clash with its perspective and the mindset that does not change conduct towards the skin or the land. It's recolonization, since it is telling youth, the natives, that the issue of history is fixed, which the expropriation bill needs to change the narrative of the issue of the fixed history to become dynamic and accommodative. But then, knowingly through the experience that things have not changed and they are deteriorating. So, to finish the issue of the expropriation, the change that the compromise is permitted to rule. Our youth and our compatriots bear this band of recolonization and recovery is a strain and troublesome, if not difficult to live with. But seeing how the after effects on the mental conflict and individuals stemming from the self-mischief and the self-destruction torments our network of us having to move forward since the inception of democracy. It is started with the taking of our lands, where the following stages of guarantee has made altogether an intruder to handle each part of our life and guarantee that assents to seize back our lands. To do this, colonists continue to strip us of our capacity to accommodate ourselves, to recuperate and reclaim what originally belongs to us. To really indicate and exacerbate the situation, since it is perplexing to individuals to experience this psychological ill treatment considerably more than others, there is absolutely intolerable colonial infected dynamics, but we should be resilient to build the South Africa we need for ourselves. The way that we need to decolonize it is to apostatize the hegemonic constitution inside which compromises our worldview. And we know it is highly unlikely to get out of a resurgence of a legitimate land-based indigeneity. Our livelihood should be shown that they have ability to determine essential nerves and mental discernition that are tormenting the perception regarding the amazing endowments that are hereditary within our constitution that we seek to expropriate. The approach is to battle the colonialism by ensuring ourselves that we are inculcating and in centering ourselves in the country and retain the wealth of the nation and continuous improvement of our homeland, South Africa. It is critical to repeal the existing Expropriation Act 63 of 1975 and its abolishment. So, inconsiderably an actual structure that empowers society to work with political, financial, and institutional directions. The development activity and immense members' contemplation should be made, some of which are administered and some of which are not, because of informal channels that have been established by political, social, monetary, mechanical, natural, moral, or lawful frameworks that are engaged in the underlying key and variables largely are the characteristics of fitting within the Expropriation Act of 63 of 1975. Facing these challenges, the normal dangers, for instance, are the characteristics, perils that represent the danger that are constructed in the environment that require inside and outside comprehension for inclination to relieve the decrease and the probability that diminish the effect adequately and proportionately for the expropriation, and then also considering Section 24, Section 25, and Section 26 of our Constitution. While we are distinguishing that each danger may not be attainable, it is being recognized that the weakness and the assurance of the built environment it is attainable and has been recognized that everybody associate with in how the respective leaders and representative of variables organizations need to carry out and achieve the critical and assessing the environmental dangers consequently, and that have been impressive in how we engage society to work with the political, the monetary, and institutional in its plan of achieving the expropriation effectively. So this indicates a number of thoughts that ought to be made to which some of are managed for social and financial and regular goods of legal systems that are doing basic factors generally are retrofitting to create the environment which we seek to promulgate as the risk of enormous scope of trade, and it require all-round appreciation for their tendency and alleviation to diminish the likelihood that belongingly and sufficiently and proportionately evidence of every threat may not be feasible, and then it is perceived that the shortcomings and conformation are manufactured of the environment will impact everyone in how the expropriation and every partners within this declines the shortcoming of the environment and thus of the basic importance. Thus, truly in our information and collection and the dilemmas and the ethics that we are facing in the expropriation, due to this, the creating of the union and real meditation of the environment, of the normal impact of the threat, perils, and critical disasters are happening, that in a point of how we peak to gain incredible and everything that accounts to the threat of the huge incident that the expropriation seeks to achieve, we come up with a proposed solution of the people who design and construct and work to the created environment have a colossal undertaking to complete in the evading and reduction of the disaster and the belongings. Additionally, more noticeable conversation and appreciation concerning the security of the built environment from a lot of risk, from perils, critical incident that address the threat that is required. Starting with the principle that is central to our expropriation is the principle of Batupili, which we begin with the Batupili-centered approach, taking into consideration our definition of the smart and the basic unit of humanity is the family. Thus, the house is the basic unit of Batupili inspired in the built environment. Next is the village, then the squatter camps, then the town, then the township, then the city, in which the territorial groupings of the Batupili inspired the built environment. For the sake of our economy, the public sector must connect with these territorial groupings and the ICT for basic connections and fiber and all the basic needs, with the private sector providing the necessary devices and accessories, which education and the civil society provide moral guidance, traditional guidance, and social belongings to the individual that is fundamentally responsible for their own self-actualization, to help the civil society, public sector, and the private sector to achieve the disconnectedness of spatial planning between the different spheres of governance, public sector, private sector, and the civil society, will require a centralization of a spatial planning system, which will integrate all spheres of government, public sector, and the private sector, also including the civil society, to coordinate and have a plan when it comes to the expropriation bill, particularly of Section 24, Section 25, and Section 26. In order to solve this problem of working in silos, it requires a change of the source of which many systems have been tailored. This can be done through a change of individual marking system to a collective system representing a primary, secondary, and a tertiary for a holistic view in terms of which we teach a South African a holistic approach in achieving the objectives of the expropriation. In doing this, we have also framework the 5D approach, including also the 6D, namely that which are disruptive, that are delinking, that we decolonize, we decentralize, we decommodify, and deglobalize to reglobalize in order to achieve the objective of the expropriation, recognizing that embrace the disruptive technology in which the manner of the expropriation will also mean forbidding the use of foreign assistance that are not crucial to the achievement of or the objective of the expropriation, and then decolonize through indigenization, adapting of local conditions, to decentralize through anti-copy laws that are not favorable to our systems in terms of how we decommodify and commodify the sales of listing utility, and also reglobalizing to the technology of our allowing ourselves to reconnect from inside our nation towards the world in order to establish a mutually beneficial relationship between men in our nation as democratic South Africa, to embrace this and allow the powers to unfold in which we maintain foreign assistance and also be part of the micro and micro intelligent built environment. So with those, the principles of Batupili have to adhere with the expropriation, which are identified as humbleness, warmth, community, collective prosperity, encouragement of diversity, collective responsibility, mutual support, redemption, peace, dignity, interdependence, mutual respect, sharing, reciprocity, empathy, morality, self-respect, generosity, collaboration, hospitality, and self-love. With this, we have recognized that the prognosis of the youth is to take decisions to concern youth participation and involvement, to the identification of conducive land that will provide high quality structures for the community, and corrective action against degradation of the
Mr.
doing everyone's job in the country.
Round up, please, because your time is almost up. If you can round up now. Remember, we are going to allow members to ask questions of clarity. If you can round up, we're given you 15 minutes. I think you have exceeded by 2 now. Please round up, Buddy.
Thank you. In the conclusion of the prognosis, the youth will recognize the decisions and the consensus of the participation of the youth and the compatriot of involvement, identification of conducive land that will provide high quality and structures to the community, corrective and preventive actions against degradation of the built environment being everyone's job in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tato Sofala. Honorable members, just 1 minute, not more than that. Any questions of clarity? Only questions of clarity. Honorable Van Schalkwyk, your hand is up.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. And thank you to Mr. Sehwali for the presentation that has been made. But Chairperson, I'm just a question of clarity. I've looked through the presentation and also heard the submission that has just been given. So I want to know Mr. Sukhwali is silent on referring to specific sections in the draft bill that is either opposed to or for. So can you give us an indication if he is for or against the entire bill, or does he have some sections that that he has a different view on? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. Honorable Graham Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I can see that a lot of thought and time and effort has gone into it, and we really do appreciate that people are taking this process so seriously. Chair, just two questions. The one is that in the documentation we received, it appears that Mr. Sexwale is representing the CBE Youth Forum. Could he just maybe elaborate a little bit on how many members there are and whether or not he has a mandate from them? And then also, I agree with Honourable Van Schalkwyk. He hasn't been particularly clear on, I'm not understanding whether or not he supports or doesn't support the bill, or if there are sections that he supports and sections that he doesn't. So if you could just give us a little clarity on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Graham Murray. Mr. Sukhwale just questions so that we record your presentation under the correct banner. Are you the spokesperson of this council? When was it formed? I read but it is not clear. If you can just so that we put it under the correct banner. Just only that for me. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. With the Youth Forum, it was formed in 2019 with the consultation of the built environment. And then with regards to the membership, it is currently in evaluation with the currently available members and also the upcoming members, which the clear indication will be given later after an AGM of ourselves. And with regards to for or against, I am for the expropriation of the Act 63 of 1975. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sukhwale. Thank you again for being with us and for presenting your submission. Thank you, sir. And then we're going to Mr. Trevor. Trevor, are you ready, sir?
Yes, I'm ready, Chair. Good morning.
Morning. Over to you. The platform is yours.
Am I clearly audible? Just to check, am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chairperson, members of the committee, guests, and House at large, I greet you. My name is Trevor Kamoto, and I am making these submissions on my personal behalf and capacity as a young business person, as a concerned citizen, and as a citizen primarily of the beloved Republic of South Africa. So I'd love to start my submission with the preamble that is contained in our constitution, which is the Act 108 of 1996. So, and the words go as thus: that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity, unquote. And it is these optimistic words that make up the preamble of our Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the Act 108 of 1996. And 25 years into democracy, the question then continues to be asked, does South Africa really belong to all who live in it, or a select few with very deep pockets, or those privileged enough to have been related to beneficiaries of the injustices of the apartheid administration, as well as the spatial planning? So that is the question that beckons or continues to be asked till this day. So according to the land audit report as published by the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform in 2018, 72% of farmland and agricultural holdings are owned by white people, with the rest shared among the Africans, Indians, and colored communities. So the report further goes on to state that over 90% of land in South Africa is farmland and agricultural holdings. So if we are to say that a minority group made up of mainly white people own 72% of farmlands, and the very same farmlands make up 80% or make up 90% rather of land in South Africa, we are well within our right to make a conclusive deduction that white people continue to own the lion's share of land in South Africa. Which then goes back to my question, does South Africa really belong to all who live in it? Again, taking excerpts from the land audit as conducted by the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, it goes on to classify its findings according to the racial groups that make up South Africa's society. And of course, as has been mentioned before, that 72% of those farmlands and agricultural holdings are found to have belonged to white people. 15% of that land was owned by coloreds, and Indians, Asians, and other smaller groups went on to make up 5% of the country's ownership of land. And then for the shocking element of these statistics is that Africans, who make up a large majority of the country's population, were only found to own a shocking 4% of the land. I will say that again, Africans were only found to have owned a shocking 4% of the land. And these are the groups that make up a large population or a large percentage of the country's population. So it is thus again fitting to pose the question, does South Africa really belong to all who live in it, as our glorious constitution alleges in its preamble? Unfortunately, Chairperson and members of the committee, I submit to you that the numbers certainly tell us a different story. So the land audit statistics as provided by the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development continue to tell a story of how the injustices of the apartheid spatial planning, land and livestock dispossession are yet to be addressed. These numbers tell a story of how the Expropriation Act 63 of 1975 has failed to address the pressing land reform issue in South Africa, and how an urgent intervention of transformation is required. In the interest of the public, in the interest of the society of South Africa, and more especially in the interest of our democratic discourse, it is thus important to adopt such a draft bill, such as the Expropriation Bill 23 of 2020, in order to address these issues of land reform as well as rural development. So shortly before I wrap up my submissions as well as prepare for questions, I would like to narrate a story to the committee as well as to the chair, if I may, as I had earlier alluded, that also in my capacity as a young business person, I make these submissions to the committee. In the year 2013, shortly after I resigned from my formal employment in order to pursue business interests and so forth, I had an intention, rather, or an idea to open up a plush car wash, actually, in the area with which I came from. And precisely so, the area consisted of a number of open fields and open spaces spaces which many of them could have actually, or I possibly identified for them to be great areas of business. And upon making that research, or upon making those spottings of those venues, I then approached my local government office to gain further information with regards to these open pieces of land and so forth. And rightly so, I was advised to go and find land which I would be interested in making use of, and come back to the municipality or come back to the authority in order to find out how I can go about using that land. And rightly so, that is exactly what happened. I went about identifying various pieces of land that I could use for business purposes. And I went back to my municipal office to inquire about the use of these building spaces, or to inquire about the use of these land spaces or these open spaces. And much of these open spaces were found to have been in private ownership. Much of these spaces were found to have been in ownership of people who were no longer able to be tracked down by the municipality or by any entity of government. Yet much of those empty spaces continue to lie empty even till this day. And the story I'm relaying to the House this morning is a story from the year 2013, precisely. So this, in essence, speaks to the issue of how certain private ownership of land spaces that continue to go unused hampers the development of this country and the development primarily of our economy, as well as the empowerment of people who seek to use land and other resources in this country to economically empower themselves and ultimately economically empower all those around them, as well as create employment for those around them. So this, in essence, is a stark example of how certain laws that have been in place in order to prevent expropriation, or in order to hamper expropriation, have stood in the way of meaningful transformation. As we all know, that we live in a country where millions of people continue to go or continue to live in squalor and squatter camps and impoverished areas and so forth. And in even the government's endeavor to provide a decent housing and accommodation for those people, land continues to become an issue. And again, land continues to become an issue because a large number of these land deposits or these land parcels, etc., are found in the hands of private owners. And at this point in time, or at this point in stage, we understand that some of the willing buyer, willing seller policies that have been in place for years are highly, highly unfeasible, and transformation thus becomes a pipe dream. So in essence, or in light of this expropriation bill, I fully support, in the sense that it will facilitate land reform, or it will facilitate the long-standing issue of land reform, as well as speedily facilitate the land reform processes, as well as the long-standing issue of land dispossession. In the interest of the public, or rather in the interest of public, I fully believe that once put into law, this draft will make it a possibility for people to be able to gain access to land for public use and for all other uses that will greatly benefit the society as well as people at large. Honorable Chair, I wish to stop there, as well as open for any questions of clarity if the House will have them, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trevor, for your presentation. Honorable members, any questions for clarity? Honorable members, any questions for clarity? Not a single person. Mr. Trevor Kamoto, thank you again. Your presentation was very clear. We really appreciate that you took your time and presented this to us. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we then go to Mr. Mlawudzi. Mr. Mlawudzi.
Chair, it doesn't look like Mr. Mlauts is online, and I've been trying to get hold of him to no avail. So I'm not sure whether we'll have to read his input as he sent on email, or we'll just have to move along.
I think let's move along so that if he may join us later, we'll then give him the chance, because we had allocated time for him today. Is the Free State Agriculture FSA ready?